How many times have you wanted to speak up, only to swallow your words just to keep the peace? How many times have you felt treated unfairly, yet told yourself, let it go, it's not worth the trouble? And you called that maturity, wisdom, being reasonable. But pause for a moment. If every act of silence requires you to betray your true feelings, then what is the real cost of that so-called harmony? It is your freedom. You trade your truth for the illusion of peace. You keep others comfortable while suffocating yourself. And day after day, you live with quiet exhaustion, suppressed frustration, and a vague sense of resentment you can't quite name. Nietzsche called this fear of conflict an invisible chain. It binds you to a morality that teaches obedience, self-denial, and silence as signs of being good. Many of us are not silent out of nobility, but out of fear. Fear of disagreement, fear of isolation, fear of losing approval. And when you fear conflict, you're not just avoiding tension with others. You are at war with yourself. You know what's wrong, but you don't speak. You know your boundaries, but you don't defend them. You know you're not okay, yet you smile and move on. This video does not encourage aggression. It invites you to do something far more difficult. Stop betraying yourself. Because according to Nietzsche, freedom does not come from silence. Freedom begins the moment you dare to confront. Before we begin, if you want to continue receiving videos that awaken critical thinking and inner strength, don't forget to support the channel with a like and a subscription. 1. Conflict and slave morality. Modern society teaches you a lesson early on. Be obedient, be accommodating. Stay quiet if you want to be accepted. From school to family to the workplace, you're praised for bowing your head, complying, and not causing trouble. What few people tell you is that beneath this polished moral surface lies a value system Nietzsche called slave morality. Slave morality is not born of strength, but of powerlessness. It is shaped by those who cannot resist directly, who lack the authority or inner force to confront. When they cannot say no, they glorify endurance. When they cannot stand upright, they rename submission as humility. And when they cannot defend themselves, they brand self-denial as virtue. In this system, obedience is praised as moral excellence, while strong will, direct confrontation, and self-assertion are labeled selfish, dangerous, or immature. Those who speak plainly are called difficult, those who challenge are called disruptive, and those who suffer in silence are praised as good, kind, and proper. Nietzsche exposes a harsh truth. This is not higher morality. It is a survival strategy of the weak. It may help people endure oppressive conditions, but it also erodes the will to live, extinguishes creative energy, and destroys the capacity for self-assertion. More troubling is that modern society and education continue to nurture this legacy. We are taught that avoiding conflict is wise, silence is maturity, and endurance is emotional intelligence. But at what cost? A generation that lives cautiously, fears confrontation, and slowly loses itself. Nietzsche does not call for blind rebellion. He warns of something deeper. Every time you avoid conflict for the sake of safety, you hand over the authority of your life to someone else.
2. Conscious conflict versus blind aggression. Nietzsche never glorified violence, nor did he admire uncontrolled aggression. His philosophy does not urge impulsive confrontation. It demands a clear distinction between inner strength and blind hostility. Not every clash is an expression of freedom. Many are simply the desperate cries of a fragile ego. Blind aggression is born from insecurity. It is a defensive reaction when you feel wounded, threatened, or exposed. The aggressive person is not strong, they are emotionally unregulated. They attack to hide fear, raise their voice to avoid facing inner emptiness. There is no freedom here, only reflex and emotional dependence. Conscious conflict, by contrast, is the mark of clarity and self-possession. It does not arise from anger, but from truth. Clarity about your values, your boundaries, and the reality you refuse to distort just to keep others comfortable. In conscious conflict, you don't need to win, dominate, or prove superiority. You simply stand firm in what you know is right. Nietzsche emphasized a core truth. Freedom is not found in external victory, but in internal loyalty. You can win an argument and still lose yourself. You can accept disagreement, remain calm, and still fully protect your identity. That is real strength. The free individual does not seek conflict to satisfy the ego, nor do they flee it for safety. They face it when necessary, speak when silence becomes betrayal, and stop when words no longer reflect their truth.
3. Why society needs those who dare to confront. Societies do not collapse because of too much conflict, they rot because of too much silence. When everyone chooses safety, avoidance, and not making trouble, injustice doesn't disappear, it becomes better protected. Collective silence creates an environment where wrongdoing goes unchallenged and toxic power thrives without resistance. A silent society stops evolving. Unjust structures persist not because they are right, but because no one dares to say they are wrong. Submission is mistaken for order. Fear is disguised as peace. Over time, the abnormal becomes normal, and the wrong becomes an unspoken rule. In such conditions, those who confront are always labeled problematic. Whistleblowers, critics, truth-tellers, they are uncomfortable, unsettling, and disruptive. They expose cracks the majority wants hidden. They force society to look at what it prefers to ignore. And for that reason, they are often isolated, attacked, or pushed aside. Yet history reveals an undeniable truth. Every social advancement begins with voices that disturb comfort. No criticism, no reform, no confrontation, no change. Conflict, when grounded in truth and responsibility, is society's self-correcting mechanism. Nietzsche rejected fake harmony. He understood that life grows through tension. Responsible conflict does not destroy society, it prevents internal decay. It forces power to be accountable, values to be questioned, and individuals to take responsibility for their actions. 4. Fear of conflict and the loss of vital energy. Fear of conflict is not just a psychological habit, it quietly drains your life force. Those who constantly avoid confrontation rarely collapse all at once. They keep working, smiling, fulfilling duties. But beneath the surface, a chronic fatigue takes root, not from labor, but from constant self-suppression. When you don't speak what needs to be said, don't set boundaries, don't face disagreement, your will to live slowly suffocates. You wake up lacking motivation, direction, and inner fire. Life continues, but vitality fades. Existence becomes a series of reactions, endurance, and waiting it out. This isn't laziness, it's trapped energy. Nietzsche saw this clearly. Life energy flows only when you live in alignment with yourself. When your actions contradict your feelings, when your words betray your thoughts, when you trade inner truth for external calm, the will to live retreats, quietly, steadily. But the moment you face conflict consciously, something shifts. Not because you defeat others, but because you stop splitting yourself in two. Energy returns when you speak despite trembling, set boundaries despite misunderstanding, and choose honesty over comfort. 5. Will to power and self-assertion. At the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy lies a concept often misunderstood: the will to power. It is not a desire to dominate or oppress others. At its core, it is the right to exist fully, the deep force driving you to affirm your values, voice, and direction in the world. The will to power is the most fundamental life energy. It urges you to grow, expand, and become more than you were yesterday. When you say, "This is who I am," defend what you believe, and pursue a path aligned with your nature, this will is alive. When you constantly shrink, yield, and avoid conflict to please others, it is crushed, and with it, your sense of self. Nietzsche saw a stark opposition: self-affirmation versus submissive morality. One teaches you to stand upright, confront, and take responsibility. The other teaches you to bow, avoid, and rename fear as virtue. You cannot walk both paths. Choosing one means abandoning the other. Personal freedom does not come from being liked by everyone. It comes from refusing to betray your own will. Sometimes living authentically means confronting family expectations, social norms, or imposed authority. And in those moments, you finally exist, not as a compliant copy of others, but as an independent individual.
6. The inner transformation: the camel, the lion, the child. Nietzsche described the journey of inner maturity through three powerful symbols: the camel, the lion, and the child. This is not abstract philosophy. It is a map of psychological transformation that most of us are already living through, whether consciously or not. The first stage is the camel. The camel represents endurance. You carry on your back the weight of expectations. Be obedient, be capable, meet standards, please others. You learn to say yes before you ever ask, "Do I actually want this?" The camel does not resist, it endures. And society rewards that. You are praised as responsible, self-sacrificing, considerate. But the price is steep. You end up living someone else's life, not your own. Then comes the second transformation, the lion. This is the moment of awakening. The lion learns to say no, not out of rebellion, but out of self-respect. It rejects imposed commands, the endless "you should" and "you must" that no longer fit. The lion dares to face conflict, to be misunderstood, opposed, and labeled difficult. This is the hardest stage, because love and approval are no longer guaranteed, yet it is here that you first stand on your own 2 feet. But the lion is not the final destination. The lion knows how to say no, but it does not yet know how to create. That is why Nietzsche speaks of the third stage, the child. The child symbolizes spiritual rebirth. At this stage, a person is no longer obsessed with resistance or opposition. Conflict is no longer an enemy. It becomes a natural part of self-expression. The child lives lightly, freely, and creates its own values, not to prove anything, not to fight, but simply to live in alignment with its true nature. The entire journey, camel to lion to child, is a movement from obedience to self-mastery, from endurance to choice, from being defined by others to defining oneself. Nietzsche does not ask you to skip any stage, but he makes one thing clear: if you remain a camel forever, you will never touch freedom. 7. Conflict as a tool for psychological growth. Conflict is not merely a clash between people. At a deeper level, it is a mechanism for psychological maturation, and when avoided, growth comes to a halt. Every time disagreement arises, you are not only facing another person, you are facing yourself. Which values are real, which boundaries must be defended, and what you are willing to stand up for. Conflict forces you to choose. In moments of tension, you can no longer live in vagueness. You must clarify what truly matters to you and what is merely a habit of pleasing others. It is precisely in these uncomfortable moments that your inner map becomes visible: who you are, where you stand, and what you will no longer accept.
Facing conflict is also a form of mental training. You learn to express thoughts instead of suppressing them. You learn to speak emotions instead of hiding them. You learn to hold your ground without attacking or over-explaining. These skills do not come naturally. They are forged in real-life friction, where raw emotion appears and you are forced to master it. Avoiding conflict, by contrast, freezes the psyche. When you consistently dodge disagreement, your brain absorbs a dangerous lesson. Safety matters more than truth. Over time, you lose clarity about your own needs, lose psychological flexibility, and begin to shrink inward. Without challenge, there is no growth, only false stability and a gradually impoverished inner life. Life grows only through resistance. Without conflict, there is no personal evolution. Facing tension does not make you rigid, it makes you clearer, steadier, and freer. You don't need to seek conflict, but when it appears, don't run from it. Every time you move through disagreement with awareness, you are not just resolving an external issue, you are upgrading yourself.
8. Conflict as the path to identity. People don't lose themselves in dramatic failures. They lose themselves slowly through countless small acts of silence. When you fear conflict, you begin living according to other people's expectations. You soften your words to please your parents. You suppress your thoughts to keep peace with friends. You stay silent about what you disagree with just to satisfy your boss. Gradually, your life becomes a reaction to others' desires, no longer a conscious choice of your own. Each time you withhold the truth, you reject yourself, and that rejection is quiet and cumulative. Your identity slowly fades. You still exist, but you are no longer fully present. You are alive, but you no longer feel, "This is my life." That is the psychological cost of avoiding conflict. Nietzsche saw identity not as something given at birth, but as something forged through friction. Identity does not arise from harmony, it arises from conflict. When your values are challenged, you're forced to decide what is essential. When society applies pressure, you must distinguish between the voice of the collective and your own. When boundaries are crossed, you must stand up and define who you are. Conflict is the forge of identity, not through shouting or blind confrontation, but through inner clarity. You learn to say, "I disagree." You learn to accept being misunderstood without losing yourself. You learn to choose a path aligned with your own direction, even if it doesn't please everyone. Those who avoid conflict may live safely, but dimly. Those who enter conflict consciously pay a price, but in return, they gain something invaluable, a clear, grounded identity that is not borrowed from anyone else. 9. Silence is not virtue. Silence is often dressed up as moral beauty. Society praises it as wisdom, harmony, maturity. But for Nietzsche, this is a dangerous illusion. Silence is not always noble. Very often, it is simply fear in a refined form. Silence in the face of injustice is not neutrality. It is a choice, and that choice quietly enables wrongdoing to persist. When you do not speak, the message is clear. I accept this. No words are needed. That acceptance is loud enough for boundaries to keep being crossed. Injustice doesn't require many evil people. It only needs good people who choose silence. More dangerously, prolonged silence corrodes the one who stays silent. Each time you endure wrongdoing without response, you teach yourself that you deserve such treatment. Self-respect erodes. Personal boundaries blur. Eventually, you live in a world where respect is no longer a given. Nietzsche did not advocate recklessness or aggression. He emphasized a deeper quality. Courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. The courageous still tremble, still worry, still understand the cost. They act anyway, because they know the cost of silence is far greater. Personal freedom cannot exist under enforced silence.
It emerges only when you dare to say what must be said, stand up when boundaries are violated, and take responsibility for your voice. Every act of courage, no matter how small, is a step out of passivity.
10. Practicing Nietzsche's philosophy in everyday life. Nietzsche's philosophy was not meant to sit on a bookshelf. It only becomes real when it is lived, tested, and practiced daily. And this path does not begin with dramatic confrontations. It begins with small, everyday conflicts you usually choose to ignore. Practice starts with clarity. State your needs instead of hoping others will guess. Set boundaries instead of silently enduring. Refuse reluctantly give an agreement just to keep the peace. These actions may seem simple, but for many, they are an inner revolution. For the first time, you choose your truth over others' approval. When you begin, guilt and fear of being disliked will surface. Do not rush to conclude that you are wrong. Nietzsche called this the residue of slave morality, the voice that taught you saying no is selfish, self-protection is wrong, and pleasing others is virtue. These feelings are not signs you've gone astray, they are proof that you are leaving an old conditioning behind. Each time you face conflict consciously, a transformation occurs. You move from the camel, who only carries and endures, to the lion, who dares to say no and stand upright under pressure. And when confrontation no longer comes from fear or defiance, you begin to touch the state of the child, where you live naturally, creatively, and free from the obsession of pleasing anyone. This path does not promise ease, but it offers something far more valuable than false peace, an integrated life, where your words, actions, and inner world no longer contradict each other. You don't need to become hard or aggressive, you only need to be honest with yourself. For Nietzsche, personal freedom does not come from the world changing, but from the moment you dare to live in alignment with your own will through small actions, conscious choices, every single day.